sector here in Eastern Kentucky. Apologies. Hopefully you guys won't hold it against us. You got a couple Hoosiers up here. I'm VP of Enterprise Sales at Make My Move. We're a company that helps communities market and attract and recruit remote workers to build their workforce, but also as an economic sector of the economy. And then I'll turn it over here to Matthew. He can tell you a little bit about his background. I came from born and raised in Indiana, did a little work in state government in Indiana and the governor's office for a while, and then spent 10 years at a consumer marketing company called Angie's List. And then a group of us started this company at Make My Move.
All right, thanks, Ben. Hello, everybody. Thought I would start out, if you all don't mind, grab a guitar here and play a little tune before we get going. It's still early morning. Okay, we'll wait till the end. How's that? So, Matt Bauer, I'm with WRC, and we're based in Wake Forest, North Carolina. I grew up in Indiana, so not far from here, and am excited to be back in the region. And so WRC was formed in 2010 by this fine gentleman here, Jerry Hayes, and it was really sort of the end of an era in Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, and a lot of jobs were leaving, and Jerry was able to capture a lot of these great people and started with a real research and development bent and creating a community for those folks and companies that were enabling the wireless generation. And one of the great unique things, though, is we don't hold any patents, so we're able to create that intelligence and those solutions without actually in translating that back into the community. And then another group within WRC called Riot, which accelerates entrepreneurship and runs accelerators and trainings and growing entrepreneurs all over the Eastern Seaboard, and has been doing great work since 2014. And then the group I lead is called Connected Communities, which is really a culmination of work I've been doing for the past decades, where we're launching broadband strategies and digital upskilling hubs in communities, community-based hubs, so folks in those communities can get the digital skills, and we'll be talking a lot about this, so I won't get into it. But over those past decades, been starting and running companies related to this. So excited to tell you our story here today. So, I had put this in my pocket. Sorry. Let me get ready. Next slide, please. This way. It's on. Should have tested this. Aha. Did you do that? Okay, I did it. Okay. Back and forward. So I ask you to just sort of step back for a moment and imagine that day before this moment where there was this 2006, and there was nothing called the iPhone, and only 15 years ago, right? And Blackberries were cutting edge. We're all walking around with these dumb devices in our pockets. The bag phone wasn't too far behind that. So the reason why we wanted to start with this is just sort of get us in the mindset of how fast things have accelerated. So when Steve Jobs got up on stage that summer and said, "I present to you the iPhone," I mean, what he was doing was really pulling a string that now is unfolding at its full capacity, because it's not just about the iPhone and the cool apps you get from that. But at that point, the broadband networks weren't ready, the wireless networks weren't ready, the systems, weren't ready for this, and so it was pretty clunky for a while for all of us that were doing that. But what happened then in the subsequent years is the systems matured, the networks matured, but they only matured for some, and they didn't mature for all because the infrastructure didn't keep up with it in places that are more rural or even in urban settings where folks can't afford it, and so on and so forth. So we're going to get into the next phase of this, is what's happened in the last few years. But the important thing to realize is this is a really magnificent point in time where we have to just take off the blinders and really look at what is the opportunity for communities, for people that haven't really jumped onto the digital revolution. And that is an amazing development opportunity for us. And if we were here, we were talking about this at coffee this morning, if we were here 2 years ago, we couldn't talk to you the same way that we are today. So it really is a marvelous moment to be having the conversation that we are having today. And then 13 years into that, we had a pandemic.
Right.
What happened?
Right. So obviously, from our vantage point, from Make My Moves vantage point, we actually started, we were doing talent mapping. So we looked at, based on the iPhone and based on our LinkedIn profiles, Facebook, we as consumers and just as people leave a bunch of digital fingerprints essentially all over the internet that tell a lot about who we are. And so what we were doing was trying to map, essentially, we had a 80 million person database where we're mapping talent all across the world, really. And through that mapping, you can start to essentially connect dots and delineate from folks and understand, hey, where do they go to school? Where do they come from? Those sort of things. And through essentially consumer marketing, you can begin to engage with those folks. Hopefully they'll engage back with you. But you can start to have a conversation and ultimately start to see if they would have any inclination of moving places. That's what we were doing. And then when the pandemic started, one of the things that we noticed was the rapid increase in remote workers, right? So we essentially went from, remote work wasn't necessarily prevalent prior to the pandemic, albeit there were 5 million permanent remote workers in the United States. That changed essentially overnight. I think the slide talks about that, but really the workplace changed. As things shut down, we went from essentially 5 million to over 60 million remote workers in a matter of weeks. Currently, that stands at about 40 permanent. But you have all projections show that essentially, from a 2, 3, 4% of workforce to 25% is going to be permanently remote. And for the first time, really in a long time or forever, is you have detangled essentially the location of where you reside and the work that you do. For the most part, it was always connected, right? You moved to the city where your employer was. You moved or you lived on the farm where you did the work, that sort of thing. And now, for the first time really in human history, right, we have decoupled that to where you can work for an organization far away. You are no longer tethered to that desk or that job or that office building. And because of that, it provides an awful lot of opportunities for communities to look at that remote worker.
And it is, everything we're saying, just please imagine it in the context of what it means for Eastern Kentucky and for the region and the opportunity that has presented itself. Because I live in Denver, spend most of my time there, been to other big cities in the last months. And office buildings, friends I know that work in those offices, they're empty, and folks aren't coming back. And what that has done for all of us here is create those opportunities, because the employers are having to say, okay, I give. Because, 20 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, let's say, it really wasn't necessary to report to the factory every day. I mean, a lot of the work could be done from other places. And as we'll get to, the key is obviously we need to have the broadband networks in place, and we need to be able to do the remote work from places. But that is, and we'll talk a little bit about what's coming there too. I mean, the awakening moment of COVID and what it did is to say, wait a minute, we do need to get that fast broadband to every American. We do need to get it out into the communities. And it's not just for work, but obviously for people's health and to do homework and to do other things. but that is a base core enablement. So now we're looking at it. Folks really hadn't caught up to that. Hey, this is electricity. This is a railroad. These are innovations. Broadband is equal on par with those in terms of all the benefits it can bring to communities. And COVID awakened us to that reality that we need to have that for folks to be able to participate in modern society.
So I think this slide shows, right? So you have essentially this permanent now sector of the economy. I mean, as Matthew was talking about, when you think about the quality of a community, or a business that Apple is, they spent over $1 billion, in their beautiful headquarters. And even they are having challenges to find people. At the end of the day, and this is a global problem, there are just not enough people to go around for the jobs that are needed. So if you're a skilled professional, you can almost work anywhere. You have leverage now with your employer in the sense that there are more jobs right now than there are people to fill those jobs. And so the fact of the matter is sort of the cat's out of the bag. People have realized they were able to do their jobs from a remote location from home, and they're starting, and they appreciate and enjoy that flexibility, and they want that. So as you continue to see employers trying to bring folks back into the office, and they're having a challenging time doing so, and that's because of this. The leverage is now with the employee. So the fact that you have about 40 million remote workers that are permanent, and that's growing. They are now sort of free agents, right? So as we talk about and think about Eastern Kentucky, think about these folks are sitting there oftentimes on the coast in very high cost areas and communities, and oftentimes in places where they don't have a sense of community, where they're unable to sort of connect. And they're actually looking, we talk about it, they're essentially have the ability to sort of go wherever. And so working from remote or remote working really unlocks this sort of digital economy opportunity for communities to go and actually attract those folks and say, hey, here's a place that would love to have you. We're welcoming. We want you to be a part of our community, and these are the type of places that they're looking for. So Upwork, an economist, Adam Ozimek, did a recent survey, and essentially of that 40 million, you have just under half, about 18 million permanent remote workers right now are actively thinking. They're looking around. They're finally realizing that they're sort of untethered from their desk. They're looking around and they're going, okay, I can keep my job. I can do it from anywhere. Is this where I want to live? Is this where I want to grow my family? Is this where I want to, reside? Or is there someplace better? Is there a better place, a better fit for me in my life? And so when you think about 18 million folks who are actively looking, what an amazing opportunity, especially when you think about you only need a handful of folks to really change the trajectory of an area. Tulsa Remote was doing this prior to the pandemic. They've been doing this for 3 years, and they've moved 1,800 people to Tulsa, Oklahoma, remote workers, 1,800 remote workers. So if you think about that, just how that can really change a region, let alone a community.
And we're really painting two sides of a coin here, in that there's the exodus, the movement of folks that's going to be happening around the country, and they're looking for places that they want to live and raise a family and be passionate about and be able to afford. And then on the other side, it's taking the folks who are already in the community, who are multi-generational, that do not want to leave, that want opportunity. So as we go back and forth, we're touching on both of these elements. And on the other side of the coin, there are about 3 million jobs, and what we call them middle skill jobs. So they don't require a college degree. Let's say it's between high school and college, about a deficit of about 3 million jobs that are going unfilled, that require a certain amount of digital competency and upskilling, but don't require that 4-year degree or 2-year degree. That can come right after that, right? But if we get them enabled so that they're on the path and they're doing digital skill-related jobs, then they can keep building on that with certificates, go to the community college, go to the university as a follow-on too. So about 65% of the country doesn't have a 4-year degree of folks who are over 25. So it's about thinking, what do we do there, and how do we enable them? And it's through these kinds of activities where we can do the digital upskilling in the community, pair them with jobs, have them stay in the community, import those funds in, as well as bringing folks into the community who want to live here and want to grow families. So I'll take a quick lead on this. When we talk about the digital divide, it means if you ask 1,000 people, you'll get 1,000 answers, and really what we've boiled it down to is there's 3 elements of it that are sort of holding this from happening, holding it back from happening. And these are traditional proven elements, which is physical broadband to someone's home or to a house to a business or in the community. The second is affordability. Folks that already have fast internet going by them, but they couldn't afford it. And then the third is the abundance. What do we do with that once we have it? What's the right training? What's the right combination? How do I position myself and then get those jobs that aren't necessarily going to be in my community? There probably are some here and in the Eastern region that if you had the right digital skills, you could be paired with those. That's a great thing, and we try and strive for that first. But then again, those 3 million jobs around the country, those are only going to keep growing, and the hill is only going to keep climbing there in terms of the digital skilling you need to keep up with those. But in this context, there's about $60 billion coming from the infrastructure bill, and a lot of you already know this, I'm sure. But these plans that are being developed by all 50 states are, and I applaud governors and Kentucky's leadership in this area, is that it's not just for the physical connection, but it's also for training. It's also for other infrastructure to enable all citizens to be able to participate in this paradigm. And that is coming, starting next year. So we want to be prepared for that, and that's part of the discussion we're having and some good examples.
Yeah, and to I think, reiterate that this is as much, I think, an opportunity to recruit people as it is a challenge of keeping those folks. So as Matthew said, as more and more jobs become remote, and as you have folks that have the skill set, then they also have the capabilities of essentially more opportunity opens up for them. And so it's really critical for communities to think that, both from an attractive perspective, but also for a retention perspective. I was traveling in Ohio, and I was meeting with some economic development folks who told me how they had, in the last 15 years, developed essentially a program where they would go into the high schools and talk to the high schools, especially the junior and seniors of the high school, and understand what do they need with respect to sort of their future. And oftentimes for those folks that were maybe not looking to go to a 4-year institution, sort of connecting them with the employers for training and those sort of things. And one of the gentlemen said, oftentimes I would ask, how many of you love your community? And he'd say, you get about 98% that would raise their hand. And then he would ask, how many of you see the future or your future in this community that you love? And oftentimes he said throughout the years, it'd be, maybe 80, 70%. And then in the last 10 years, it would be maybe about 20%. And it was all because of the economic opportunity that they thought that existed inside that community. Now that is changing. Now you can have someone that loves their community. They can go to a 4-year institution. They can stay there. They can get some training. But if they have the ability, they can actually go and pursue that Boston Scientific job that doesn't require you to be in Boston, or whatever it may be. And so now all of a sudden it's an opportunity for communities to start looking at this, and it's an opportunity for folks to go out, get that education, but they don't have to essentially trade in where they would like to live with the career path that they would like to pursue. And so from our perspective, what we look at is both from, hey, this is an opportunity to go get and attract folks, but it's also an opportunity, as Matthew was saying, of making sure that the folks that you do have there that want to reside there have the opportunity to grow and aspire to their goals and life aspirations in the community that they want to live in. So I think, here are some real world solutions and actions we talked about. You want to talk a little bit about the USVI?
Yeah, I'll start out with a little history, and then we'll talk about Make My Move, and then a project that we WRC are deploying right now. I like during the last the financial crisis of 2009. There was some stimulus money that came out, and so a small group of us, many of whom now were doing this as part of WRC, that we went out and wrote a grant application for the U.S. Virgin Islands, which is 3 islands, about 150,000 population, and to do a comprehensive. It's cool because it's like in a petri dish. Like, we did the whole thing. We did the broadband, we did the upskilling centers, we did the computer centers, and then the measurement around this. And essentially it was to run broadband across the 3 islands, and then also build a couple digital upskilling centers, because the jobs the unemployment was about 30%, and the largest employer had just closed in addition to the financial crisis. And so we were able to look at, okay, what happens when you import jobs directly into the community, because there weren't any there at the time. So we had to get employers in the U.S. to open up their doors to hiring folks in the territory, and we learned a lot from that. And what we did learn is the opportunity is real, and this was 10 years ago, so it was still available then, and now it's on, it's on hyperspeed. So we gained a lot from that, but after working with about 1,500 people through those programs and seeing what training was required and jobs that were able to be gotten, it really empowered us to be doing the work we're doing now, which I'll talk about, but let's go through.
Yeah, so
Ben's
as I
story first.
talked about, as we were mapping talent across the globe, really, our business model was we would engage with employees on behalf of employers. When the pandemic hit, obviously, a lot of our clients said, hey, we're going to put a pause on hiring until we kind of work our way through this and see how this shakes out. Obviously, as a business, we had to sort of pivot as well. And one of the things that we did, coming from Angie's List, which essentially was a marketplace, an online marketplace, where we had service providers, really good service providers that wanted to interact and get access to homeowners, high-income homeowners. We created that marketplace. So we looked essentially at replicating that, and looked at Tulsa Remote and a handful of other communities. There were only about 10 that had some sort of incentive package that were working at or attracting remote workers. So we said, 1, can we just create a website and put those folks up there? 2, can we drive traffic to it? And 3, if we drive traffic to it, can we engage with that traffic and try to move things around? Which we did. And then, so being from Indiana, we kind of looked around and said, how come there aren't really any Indiana communities doing that? And so in last year, we had about 6 pilots that we did. And really the aha moment, if you give me a second, is little Greensburg, a rural community, because, it's, can you attract people to Indianapolis, a capital city? Sure, those sort of things. But the aha moment for us was in Greensburg, a community of around 20,000 folks. Rural manufacturing have seen a demographic decline for 30 years. All of their young folks kind of leaving, don't really, didn't see a future there. Young mayor came to us and said, can you help us out? We went and did that, and it was as simple as really just marketing who they were. They came up with a great little package. They only had $25,000 to do this, so they put $5,000 for any household that they could relocate. And the best thing was this, very similar to, I think, Eastern Kentucky communities. It's a community where when you see someone, you ask them how they're doing, you mean it, and you anticipate having a 5-minute conversation about it, and you care about it. And if they say, hey, I'm doing okay, or so-and-so's sick or whatever, it wouldn't be surprising that if someone shows up, or you get a card, or maybe there's a casserole that comes by or something like that. It's one of those type of communities. One of the things they did was affordable childcare is a problem across the United States. What they did, part of their package, was if you came to their community, some of the retired folks would, they called it grandparents on demand. They would do pick up your kid from soccer practice. If you need a babysitter, they come over and do babysitting for free. And the fact that they said grandparents and not free babysitting was really an indication of what this community is about. They look at everyone sort of as an extension of their family. This little town got 2,000 applicants for 5 spots in a matter of 3 weeks. We moved a software engineer from Amazon that works for Amazon out of Silicon Valley, his wife and his 2 young children, making $150,000 to Greensburg. He knew where Indiana was, didn't know that Greensburg existed. And that was really the power of the fact that there are people out there looking for places like this. And if you aren't telling them about it, if you aren't marketing to them, if you aren't asking them to come and saying, hey, you're welcomed here, we would like you here, they won't find you. And for us, that was sort of the aha moment for us. And we said, okay, this is impactful. This societal shift is happening, and this is now a time for sort of middle America and rural America to get into a game, because it was always the traditional economic development was go find an employer that invests and moves their business into your community that creates jobs, and then people come for those jobs. Well, when you don't have enough people for jobs, that doesn't work very well. How do you get those people? And so that's what we're doing at Make My Move, and we have a bunch of examples now in communities that we're working with, and are looking forward to potentially doing some things here in Eastern Kentucky.
Great, and thanks, Ben. The last example is within the group that I'm involved with at WRC Connected Communities. We've launched now we're in the process of launching our 3rd Digital Bridge, and Digital Bridge is a social venture that is community level, community-based, and an actual physical hub in the communities where we're operating that meets people where they're at in terms of getting them on their digital pathway. And it's really, the mission is to accelerate that and accelerate America's digital workers, and to create a repeatable model that can be deployed and eventually then taken over by the community. And so what we're doing is everything from the entrance of them into our system, the outreach and so on, the assessment, and then moving them through to goals, and then coaching, and then out and physically pairing them with the jobs at the other end as well. Our flagship is in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and that's our first hub that we opened in April. We just opened Grand County, which is a rural county in Colorado. And Jerry and I just drove from Wilmington, North Carolina, where real innovative partnership there that's going on. The city of Wilmington voted to fund the digital hub in the city. We're partnering with local nonprofits to build and launch that as well. Not physically build a building, it'll be inside one of the nonprofits, Step Up Wilmington. So the employers then are all sitting around saying, here's the folks we need and we'll hire them from you, and giving us those specifications. So we literally had our kickoff meeting a few days ago, and that model of the government, community, and the expertise all coming in, because the funding, it's a matter of will. The funding is out there. There's a lot of ARP money left over. There's a lot of money coming from the infrastructure bill and the Digital Equity Act, and other pots that are sitting out there. So it's not a matter of if we can do this, it's whether we, and I think one of the things we're going to harp on a little bit, and I know we got to start closing the shop here and get to some questions, which I'm sure you have. I did want to highlight one of the other efforts that is going on as far as examples in Eastern Kentucky as well, and I'm sure many of you know it as Teleworks USA. And as our time is winding down a little bit, definitely welcome you to go to their website as well and learn more about what the work they've been doing here since 2015. Very similar to what we've been talking about, though. So as we sort of get to our closing juncture here, I think the opportunity and what we're saying is this moment is probably the moment of a lifetime, right, of a generation for sure.
Yeah, I agree. So we're happy to take questions, but I think, as Matthew said, there's funding. You have organizations that at this point have proven concept at scale, And so really it's a matter of communities kind of coming together. And I always say it's two things. If you have these two things, you can do it. And if you don't have these two things, then it's really hard. But it's all about leadership, will and leadership to do something, and creativity. Because are there going to be challenges along the way? Because each community is unique, each region is unique. Yes, of course. But if you have the leadership and you have the creativity to figure out how to solve the problem, you'll be able to, find the solutions. And really this is, we feel very much so that this is an opportunity, sort of a once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-generation opportunity that exists. And we're just excited to talk about it, tell people about it, and work with anyone that's, got those two things, leadership and creativity. So happy to take questions at this point.
And if I could just add one more item, we feel, and this was another thing we were talking about at coffee this morning, is that a regional approach is really key, and that's why SOAR and you all are this is so important for this area and this region, is to do it together and not have, an isolated examples of these, because we can really then accelerate that change over the whole area of Eastern Kentucky. So we had a few more slides, but I don't think, I think we've covered pretty much everything, but we'll leave it on this this slide here, which is thinking big. So any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So almost looking at it from the opposite side, instead of, I do agree that I think we're in a great position, opportunity to be able to recruit others that would like to move here, but looking at the opportunity of how do we prepare our people, so most people, if they move away from here, you'll hear time and time again, people don't want to leave, but they move for job opportunities, right? And so if there's already a lessening of job opportunities, how do we prepare our people or train them to be comfortable with this other outlet? Because for centuries, or generations, we've been such a hands-on workforce that we often don't trust things unless it's tangible. And so for this, it's something that is, but it isn't tangible. It's not, you don't properly work. You don't know, it's a different situation. So how can we as a region train and help our own community to understand and trust and pursue the opportunities to stay here, but also make a good living remotely and have that as a real potential?
That's a really,
Go
okay
ahead.
if I, you said that really well, and I hope we have that recorded, because that's a highlight for sure. So what we look at when there are hard skills and there are soft skills, and I meant to say this earlier. I mean, this is scary to a lot of people. It is very normal for a lot of folks, and for a lot of folks that have been doing hands-on type of work or other types of jobs. This is scary for a number of reasons, and one is that it's very entrepreneurial too. It doesn't have, in one respect, it has an incredible amount of empowerment, because as you gain these skills, it is a ladder, and you can keep adding and adding and adding. You can add a degree at some point. You can add, if I want to be a programmer, I get some certificates, I start programming, I make more money, I go to the university, I get a computer science degree, now I'm managing people and I'm doing, but getting somebody just in the door is a challenge. And so that is something, I mean, I don't want to say it's a direct comparison, but what's interesting is in downtown Wilmington, we're actually encountering the same kinds of reticence, right? I've been doing a certain kind of job, I've been, and I don't trust this, and it's not. So it's getting those soft skills and that apprehension out of the way, which requires a certain kind of acceptance and training and getting folks in, and then determining, okay, well, what are you good at? What do you want to do? What do you have skills in already? And then let's augment that and get you on a path. Because the types of jobs can be very, we think of like, automatically you go to like, oh, I want to be a programmer. It's like, of course, you can do that from anywhere in the world. But what about an inside salesperson? Or what about a call center person? Or like, I'm really good with people. I'm really good. I've been doing, working a cash register for the last 10 years. So you're really good at handling customer service. That translates well into a call center type job. And remote call center workers are now probably more normal than folks who go into a center. So I would say that the way to structure that is to have the right kind of services on the ground, meeting people where they're at, getting them through that apprehension, and that isn't digital training. That's life skills, and that's a different type of thing. Then you start with and that's how we're structuring our program with Step Up Wilmington, as an example, is that other stuff comes first, and then you start the digital training and the other skills and get them into some sort of job or position where they can start feeling what that's like, and then build on it. Sorry, I hope that answered your question without spending too much time, but we have a lot more that we could talk about in that area.
And if I may, I think there's a tail too, right? So as your traditional jobs become remote, what will happen is people will start to realize that there's job opportunities that are remote. What I mean by that is, a business organization will say, hey, I'm hiring for this, but they can't fill that spot. So then they'll just add something that says it's a remote capability, and all of a sudden you have applicants. Those applicants can come from almost anywhere. And so as you start to see more and more companies do that, more and more jobs become that capability, then now all of a sudden it is tangible for folks here because they can see that. And then as you bring people that have, what do you do for a living? Oh, I work for this company, I do this. I didn't know that they're here. Oh, they aren't. They're here, but I live here. Now all of a sudden it opens up the fact that, okay, conceptually, I can start to actually look out, and rather than just open up a paper or whatever, classifieds, and start seeing where are the job opportunities here, I can actually start expanding that search and go, well, this is what I'd like to do. Are there remote options for that?
Any other questions? Ideas, please.
So I think we're both going to probably answer a lot of these from a different angle. From our angle, one, what we do is community marketing, right? When you're trying, from a recruitment perspective, as you're trying to recruit people here and talk about the region, the community, whatever it may be, the existing employers are part of that community, so very much so you need to engage them for a couple reasons. One, they're oftentimes, right, sort of a bedrock of the community. They're a component of what you're marketing. The second thing is, they have resources so they can help with respect to what you're offering these folks, whether that be soft incentives or hard incentives. And then there are these additional benefits. As you're attracting these people, oftentimes they're bringing other folks, trailing spouses, children, those sort of things, who are then a captured audience for your existing workforce, right? At the same time, we constantly are learning more and more what these remote workers want. There's really essentially 4 table stakes to this. One, they want cost of living. What they're looking for is they're sitting there going, I got a great job. I make $150,000, but I can't buy a home. I can't earn equity. I can't. So where can I go and start building something? So cost of living, safety, and then the other 2 are access to broadband or internet, because that's how they do their work, and then essentially a good medical system or healthcare system, right? So if you have those 4 things, then you're in the ball game. And so from an existing employer base, we very much look to those folks to help us, and there's obviously additional benefit. You bring these folks, they help with the tax base, which alleviates some of those things. But as we learn what remote workers want more of and what they need, then yes, we can sit there, and then those employers can learn, okay, this is how we're attracting. And the whole point of attracting these folks is understanding what their desire is, which then hopefully an employer will start to incorporate into how they're approaching these folks, what they're doing, how they're talking to their existing employer base, if that helps. I'll
go back to our Wilmington structure as an example. the three goals of that program, and I meant to bring this up, and it was another thing we were talking about. We had so much content, it was hard to remember everything, but you raised a very, very key point, which is you have to take care of the local employers and employees as part of an initiative like either of the ones we're talking about that both kind of feed the same thing, which is to upskill local employers, their employees has to be part, and that is part of the service that we offer at all of our hubs, is any employer that wants to bring groups or individuals of their employees to get them, could be spreadsheets up to programming, up to whatever they might need, that is offered at no cost to those employees and employers as part of our programming that we do with the communities. And then we also go to the employers to say, what jobs are you needing that you can't find you can't find good enough folks as far as training what they need in the community. We'll fill that for you. We'll get folks trained so that you can hire them, because they might be getting folks remote themselves, but also making sure we fill the local employers first, and then upskill those employees, and then get folks jobs who can't get jobs with those other places, and connect them to this. So that has to be part of the equation. So thank you for bringing that up. That's super important. Any other questions, ideas, comments, please? Thank you. We the first step is an orientation and kind of an overview of what's going to happen, and then get their buy-in. And then the next step that we perform is a digital assessment test, and it's usually about a 2-hour-long test that they go through, and really kind of isolates. It's not an advanced IT assessment at this stage. We can do more with those as folks advance through, but it is a comprehensive assessment to say, okay, you're missing a few items, so before we go on your journey and you want to be a data entry specialist or a call center specialist, or you should fill in these few gaps first, and then we can get you a certificate for those more advanced pieces. Like, I'll just do one, sort of carry one through. Somebody comes in, they want to be a data entry specialist for Google, and they test low on a few areas, and so we give them those modules, which are, I would call more basic, and they probably go faster, and then they would take a Coursera Google-sponsored data entry specialist certification, which takes probably 3 months, 3 to 5 months, depending on how much time they have to apply to it. Then they take a test, and then they're able to put that on their resume and go apply for those jobs. So that would be a fairly typical path. But again, you have to meet people where they're at, because every single person is going to be a little different. And that's a big problem of why this hasn't taken off as much. I mean, because it isn't a cookie cutter type of approach. You have to sit down and do you have to do this process with every single person. And there's things that we can do eventually we'll help automate that, but right now it's still, meeting people eye to eye. So you got to have that community element. Thanks for your question.
I think this might be the last one. Which component, I guess? I'm sorry. Like remote workers, or? Yeah, I think the important thing is to understand that not all jobs or not all functions will or can be remote, right? To some extent, there's going to be limitations. That's one. But I do think there are functions and jobs and roles that can be, remote, hybrid, whatever it may be. And there's more and more studies that come out that show productivity actually is improved oftentimes, not challenged. There's, at this point, there's softwares and things that folks do with respect to how you can manage and make sure that folks are doing their jobs. So by no means do we subscribe to the fact that all jobs will be remote, or there is going to be plenty of work that will be done that will need to, come into the office or some sort of supervision. But the ones that can be, I think you're going to see more and more folks that will want to be able to have that flexibility to be able to do it. And so from an employer's perspective, to be able to fill those roles with very capable people, you're going to need to also be flexible to be able to sort of open up the net wider to get more applicants and get more folks to be engaged in that.
I'll just, from my experience, I've founded 3 companies and operated all 3 for over 20 years. So I had people both in and around me every day, and had people that were remote. Some of whom I never met face to face. It was all entirely remote experience with them, and I had challenges with both. And I didn't have a HIPAA compliance element, which adds another fold to it, which you need to do all the way up and down, and there's no cutting corners around that, right? So there are certain restrictions, but I ran, a couple phone companies with call centers and with very sensitive elements to them, and I can say that honestly, I can't point to having more challenges with remote folks versus on-site folks one way or the other. I had challenges with both. Had to hire people and fire people, and in both categories. And I would say, depending on the position, I think what Ben said, some are easier than others in terms of just if they have the competence and they're able to deliver and they do what they say they're going to do, then whether they're remote or on site, then it's okay. I don't have a big challenge one way or the other. And there might be some more sensitive positions that you want to have, in and around you, and that's okay. So it isn't a zero-sum game, but what we can do is there are so many opportunities, and they're very, very much right in front of us, that we can fill up as many of those as we can, and it's not going to be a right fit for everybody, that's for sure. So appreciate your perspective, for sure. Thank you.
Well, I think that's it. Thank you all for showing up and listening. We appreciate it.
Thank you all.